What's up, y'all? It's Mr. Drake. Now that we've talked about Greek wars and government and geography, we're going to talk a bit about their culture and civilization. Now, one of the cornerstones of Greek civilization and culture at this time was the philosophers. Now, there had been this old, traditional, long-held belief that events were caused purely because of the whims of the gods. If something bad happened, it's because the gods were angry. If something good happened, it's because the gods were pleased. Well, during this time, there was an evolution in that belief, and it began to be thought that there were natural laws that controlled the way the universe worked. And this is the beginning of modern science. You begin to see a study of science, but also of mathematics and of logic. The idea that you can work through things, studying cause and effect, determining why things were the way they were. Now, the first really famous philosopher in ancient Greece was Socrates. Socrates was a stonemason by trade, but had a deep-held interest in philosophy and education, and he never actually wrote any books. He didn't write anything. Everything we know about him is from people who knew him who wrote stuff. But we do know that he invented what we now know as the Socratic method, which is a method of teaching people using questioning. And that happens in schools today. You'll have Socratic seminars where teachers will ask students questions and try to get them to explain what they believe. And that's what Socrates would do. He would just go into the marketplace and he would go up to people and he'd hear them discussing a certain scientific or philosophical point, and he would say, hey, that's interesting that you believe that. Why do you believe that? And he would try to get them to think and reflect on their views and be able to defend them successfully. Now, this was very, very revolutionary at the time. It was also immensely unpopular with the rulers of Athens, who saw having the gods there, as a moral structure being very important in society. And Socrates came in here and is questioning the influence of the gods and is saying that there's logical reasons that things happen, not just because the gods are mad or whatever, and completely tosses society and this authority system on its ear. So this is not going to go over well. And as a result of Socrates challenging the established ways in Athens, he was actually put on trial by the authorities. And the charges were a little bit trumped up, but he was charged with corrupting the youth of Athens and for disrespecting the gods. And he was tried by a huge jury of 500 people, and he defended himself and explained why he did what he did and why he believed what he believed. He was unapologetic for it. He wasn't angry or nasty in any way at his trial, but he did not back down from his views. He ended up being convicted, and he was sentenced to death. And his method of execution was forced suicide. He was forced in prison to drink a poison. He actually drank hemlock, which is a poisonous plant that was ground up into a liquid paste, and he drank that and died. So that was the end of Socrates, but his legacy lived on in people that he knew and influenced. Now, a lot of what we know about Socrates today, actually we know because of Plato, who was one of Socrates' students. Plato was very angry after Socrates was executed because Plato respected him so much and really believed in what he had been doing. So he actually left Athens for a while, but eventually he came back. He founded the Academy, which is one of the first big schools in Athens, where he trained people sort of in the Socratic style, using questioning, logic, deduction, things of that nature. His most famous work of philosophy is known as the Republic, which was a pretty long written piece. And in the Republic, he advocates that classes should be divided up in society, and there should be three primary classes. One is the workers to make the essential goods, the soldiers to defend a society, and the philosophers who would rule. He believed that the philosophers had the best world view, that they best understood what civilizations needed, what countries needed, what was important, and so they should be the ones making the rules, not military generals, not harsh dictators, but one wise, virtuous ruler who could apply these principles of logic and reason and natural law and make society work better. Now, just like Plato was taught by Socrates, Plato in turn had a very famous pupil that ended up becoming a very well-known Greek philosopher, and that's Aristotle. Aristotle was a student of Plato's at the academy, studied under Plato, and shared many of his views. Both Plato and Aristotle were suspicious of democracy. They thought democracy was good in theory, the idea that the people would ultimately, decide the best course of action for a country or a civilization or a society. But at the same time, they believed that democracy is what had condemned Socrates, that all these people got together and decided that he was doing bad things and therefore should be put to death, even though what he was doing, according to them, was good. So they saw democracy almost like mob rule and thought that it should be not trusted and not necessarily put into place in every society. So that is kind of an interesting way to look at democracy, if you really think about it. Aristotle founded another school called the Lyceum in Athens, and there they studied a little bit of everything. There was history and biology and astronomy and logic and philosophy, all kinds of stuff. The basis of what we would now today call a classical education. And you may have heard of schools that provide a classical education in the humanities and with the Socratic method in place and things like that. When universities years later are founded in Europe in cities like Paris and Bologna, Italy, they really model themselves after the Lyceum, both in how they teach and in the types of courses and curriculum and areas of study that they offer. So this is one of the biggest influences that ancient Greece has in our society today, is really the system of education and the style of higher education that became prevalent in the West. And that's all for today. There is going to be a quiz on this video, and make sure you have good notes for that quiz to study, and that will be on Moodle during our next class. Be sure to keep studying your notes and all your important terms, and be staying on top of your assignments. As always, be sure to ask Miss Hall or myself if you have any questions. Cheers!